Hi, I'm Sumit Bose, and this is the Net Hero podcast. Who's it for? It's for you. If you care about the planet and you care about business. We believe that businesses are responsible for a lot of the damage that has been done to the planet, but they're also responsible for finding the solutions. We need innovation, we need ideas, we need people who are trying to make a difference, and that's what this podcast is about. If you know someone who is trying to make a change, then get them to come along on the podcast. Listen in every week, subscribe, and make sure that you follow us on social media. Our two news platforms, Energy Live News and Future Net Zero, cover everything we do. And this episode is recorded live, so enjoy. Price. It's everything, isn't it? We look at what's going on right now with the conflict in the Middle East, and it's all about the pressure on energy prices. Survey after survey has been done recently saying that consumers are fed up with it, businesses are fed up with it. The answer, most believe, is to stick with what we're doing, trying to go down the net zero path. But there are criticisms about how we're doing that. Wind, when it's blowing really well, sometimes we haven't got the battery storage to make use of it. Curtailment is the thing they call it, where people are being paid to turn it off. There's controversy about whether we should start drilling for oil again. But in general, most people do believe that the offshore industry will be a big, if not biggest player in our renewable future. At present, most of our energy comes from offshore wind, but that's not all there is. There's tidal, there's floating wind, there's interconnectors, there's batteries. So how do we bring all of that together? What are we doing to make sure that we're ready to try and use this great resource we've got, particularly around the British Isles, but also globally, of natural wind and renewable energy? Well, today, did I say I'm joined by Dr. Christina Garcia Duffy from a group that you might hear the surname of before, but not the first name, the ORE Catapult, which is basically the offshore renewable energy catapult. Christina, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Yes, doing very well, Summit. Thank you very much for inviting us to
My
talk
pleasure, my
today.
pleasure. People have heard of the word catapult, right? Because there's a energy systems catapult. What can you explain what ORE catapult is? And just so people get an idea, are you a government body? Are you sort of private? How do you work?
So we are a private entity, and we are supported by Innovate UK, which is the UK's
Right.
innovation agency. They provide a core grant to the offshore renewable energy catapult so that we can help businesses and connect academia with businesses to develop technology in the sector. And the offshore renewable energy catapult is the particular catapult out of the network
Yeah.
supporting businesses in offshore renewables, mostly offshore wind, both fixed bottom and floating wind, and also a little bit of wave and tidal.
When you talk about offshore energy, it's a very funny one because the original offshore energy was obviously oil and gas, but that doesn't come under what you do, is it? Because you are purely about renewable, correct?
Correct. We are around renewables. We do work with some oil and gas companies because they have technologies that are relevant
Yeah.
to the wind turbines, substructures, things like that for the offshore sector. Also, things like robotics. Oil and gas
Exactly. I was
are
going to say.
much more
Yeah.
advanced than we are at the minute because there has been a lot of investment in that area. So we do have synergies with them and we work with them. We mostly, though, support companies that are in the renewable space.
Where are we with the whole offshore green sort of thing? Because if you look at it, I remember going to, I think it was was it, where was it up in, it was called, I think Eric or something. It was up in Orkney, and it was years ago, and it was about kind of tidal power. It's an innovation center. Then
Mhm.
we had a lot of stuff about kind of, oh, we're going to really invest, make it, as Boris said, the Saudi Arabia of wind. Floating wind is going to be the next big thing is happening. And all these things have been bit parts. We've had some big successes, but we've also had, in the last year, you've probably seen it, some big companies saying we're pulling out of
Mhm.
building wind farms. So, for the audience, can you frame, most of us would probably think if you're working in the energy space, ESG space, that offshore wind is kind of quite a mature industry, but there still seems to be some sort of kind of backlash towards it. So, Where are we sitting right now?
So it depends on what we mean about mature and longevity. Just to frame it into context, in 2025, we decommissioned the first two offshore wind turbines off the coast of Blyth. That was the first offshore wind
Yeah,
development in the UK. And since then, I'd say the last 10 years have been staggering in the amount of um, deployed capacity that we've had, particularly in the UK. We have about 15 gigawatts deployed of wind energy. We're number two in the world behind China, yet the size of our country is, a magnitude difference
yes.
compared to others. So progress has been staggering. It's been really fast. It's a testament to how much the sector has developed. But we have to bear in mind that we've only been around for 25 years in comparison to other more industrialized sectors, say in automotive or aerospace. It's
Yeah,
still a sector that needs support. The technologies have been developing really fast. We go for ever larger and larger turbines that cost a lot of money to develop, and we
yeah.
need investment in those areas. So I'd say since, I joined this sector from aerospace about 4 years ago. This was where the Scottish Wind Round was announced. It was unprecedented, the amount of capacity that was released through the Scot Wind Round. We've had some dips like AR5, a
Yes.
little bit on AR6. Now we've had great success on allocation round 7, and we're hoping that there will be a steady increase in capacity being taken on from now until then. Now, wind is, as you say, it's a variable input of an electricity. We do need to ensure that curtailment is reduced as much as possible, and that combination between wind and batteries or wind and hydrogen production, which is at a very low TRL at the
Yeah.
moment, works for the system, because the electricity system is a system. It's not individual projects coming together.
This is the thing that I suppose, you know, I've always thought the wind is a clever thing and I like it. I think it's big stuff. But the critics would say we've done perhaps the horse before the cart because we've gone for building all these turbines and then, perhaps we didn't realize how much wind we're going to get. And we don't have enough of the infrastructure to bring that power on board. We're not building enough batteries. We haven't got enough interconnectors. So, do you think, looking back, I mean, I know you've only been in this particular sector for 4 years, but you've probably been aware of it. Do you think that there's been a slight mismatch of planning? But we've gone for building assets without thinking about the wider infrastructure, which government, and to be fair, the grid is now looking at.
Yeah, well, we needed a critical mass of those
Right.
assets to be able to understand. And the more deployment we have in different areas of the country and the better grid infrastructure we have, it means we can pull the power where we need it, when we need it at the time. When we talk around these circles, we say there are three bottlenecks in
Okay.
the system. One is around consenting, is getting the projects,
Right. The planning. Yeah.
the planning, which can take up to a decade nowadays, using more innovative methods of collecting data, of getting knowledge around the sites, the birds, the fish, all of the structure, the grid connection, so that we can consent the projects earlier. The second one is the grid. And National Grid, ESO now have really good plans for an investment for getting the grid into a position where we can deploy the electricity. The queues are still really long for
Yeah.
some of the projects, and they kept getting delayed because it is not a trivial issue that we have. It is being addressed. And the third one is supply chain capacity. We have a system where companies don't know if they're getting the project. So the wind turbine manufacturers, the cable manufacturers, they don't know until almost final investment decision whether they're
Mm,
getting the contracts. So it means that the relationship is quite transactional between the developers who are owning the sites and the supply chain. It means the supply chain cannot also think longer term and invest in new facilities, new manufacturing, because they don't have a pipeline of projects for a decade. They have 2 years at a time, kind of
yes.
thing. And that's cultural. It needs to be addressed.
How much of this can you, as ORE Catapult, address? Because I suppose, if you look at what's happened over the last 18 months, the government has said we're going to scrap red tape, allow planning to go quicker. There'll be end of the, first in line. It'll be like what's project ready to try and cut the queues. And supply chain is still a problem. I think it's a massive problem for this country. But if you look at it all, are you really able to help anyone in those areas,
Mhm.
or are you really just, you're looking, maybe I should have done this at the beginning, but you're looking to sort of, help a small company get some scale, get some investment, because it's in the offshore renewable space. So what can you do about those three problems you just discussed?
So we are at the core innovating with the companies. We're very much business aligned. If the businesses don't need help, then we don't exist. So we work around market failures where the companies don't either have the funding or don't have the knowledge or need more assurance around how good the technologies they're developing are going to address a problem. So if we're talking around consenting, we help a number of supply chain companies, SME data companies to large robotics companies, develop things like sensors, cameras,
Ah,
communication
right. Yeah, yeah.
systems so that they can collect that data more accurately, faster, cheaper. If we look at the other side of the spectrum, a lot of what we have in our facilities are large scale testing facilities that we use to validate technology. And those facilities are ones that single companies wouldn't be able to afford on their own. So we have open, independent facilities where they would bring us any type of equipment, say mechanical equipment, bearings, gearboxes, so that we can test them to the limit and validate that their designs are going to operate out there in a wind turbine for 25, 35 years and understand what the failure modes are, how they're going to operate, how will they inspect them, maintain them, and all of that. We also look at electrical equipment in the same way.
It's quite interesting you talk about the lifespan because just we're recording it now, and today, the day we're recording it, there's a story come out about Europe is facing a crunch that its offshore wind sector by 2030, a lot of these assets will be 20, 25 years old. And it's like, do you decommission or do you, retrofit as such? So looking at where we are now, you said initially, right at the beginning, you said, look, Blythe, that's 20 odd years. You're looking at the growth that's happened. We'll take the problems on board. And I think we all expect there will be problems ongoing. But whatever's sure, wind power is growing, correct? It's happening. So
Mhm.
more companies, the latest they are around massive demand. So if you look at that thing of growth and what government wants, companies want to do it, a lot of people will say, are these things that green in themselves? Do you know what I mean? Because you've got to build them, you've got to put the piles in. You talked earlier about the marine environment. How long will they last? What's the science that you're doing in these testing and when you're working with these companies? Because that's the other thing is that it's great to build the infrastructure. You build a nuclear power plant, you know it's 80 years. These
Yes.
things we don't quite know because there's not really that many that are old.
And also, we are starting to learn, but how you say we don't have that
Yeah,
background
yeah,
knowledge yet. And also, in the circular economy side of things, what you want is those assets to be there as long as you can,
of
because the
course.
carbon intensity of getting them
Yeah.
there is potentially, higher than just keeping them running. In some other strategies, it might be better if you reconsent a site, you redistribute, and you have less wind turbines of bigger capacity so that you can generate equally or more, but with less amount of wind turbines to maintain, less materials, and so on. So all of them are valid. What we do is we work with companies. I'll give you an example because I can. They've given us this.
Right.
We've recently worked with RWE, who are
Yeah.
a developer. They had an onshore wind farm and they did not know how long the blades would last for. So they were thinking, well, do we change the site, all the wind turbines? How long will the existing ones will live? And what we did was we took the blade and we use simulation and testing. We bring the blades through a very intensive testing campaign to see how much life they have in them. And then with the simulation, we can provide them with assurance that they can run them for another 5 years or 10 years. Usually it's cycles kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So we can do that for those developers who want to continue to run their current assets. We also have strategies where we can help them redesign their
Yes, of course.
Yes, and
As the technology changes, I get it.
And we can help them. They might have 2 or 3 megawatt turbines, which is ancient technology right now. And
of course.
we can provide them with data and information around the newer turbines, 11, 12, 13 megawatt turbines.
Is the future bigger? Because some people have said, like you just said, fewer turbines, there's less environmental damage to the seabed, but they're just bigger. And if you have the right capacity, a much smaller footprint. And then there's floating wind. So looking at those two, with what you see coming down the line, where do you see the future? Will it be fewer and bigger? Will it be floating that moves around? Because that's now the industry. I talk to people at Renewable UK and all of that. They're very seriously concerned about the footprint that it's causing, that carbon intensity you talk about. So how do you see it at present?
Technically, I don't see a limit to the size of the wind turbines.
Just enormous, giant ones.
We are currently, just to give you an indication, so the last test hole for blades that we have in life is about 100 meters in length.
100 meters. That's
so
ridiculous.
With that, the latest blade we've tested was 107. We just chopped the tip and we went through the process, right? Too small. And we built that facility 10 years ago thinking we will never get there. We're looking at facilities now of 150 meters in length. We see turbines from manufacturers being now tested in situ of 21 megawatts. The current latest standard is 15. So I don't see it stopping.
Wow.
If you ask me my personal opinion, it's probably not going to be the turbine size that we can build and reliably develop. It's going to be restriction on port, for example.
Right,
These are very large pieces of equipment or vessels.
Or the boats to bring the things. Yeah, I get it.
So it's going to be something that's going to be so prohibitively expensive and the companies are not going to be willing to invest in.
But you're saying the science could make them pretty big.
I haven't seen the limit.
Up to the moon, join Artemis. In terms of floating wind, that's another one that, I went to a couple of conferences, maybe 2-3 years ago, met someone say, oh, it's going to be really big by 2025. It's going to be really everywhere. Hasn't quite happened. Hasn't happened actually anywhere in the globe. Where are we with floating wind, with, again, what you see in terms of the research at ORE?
Yeah, so I think it's coming and it's going to be huge and it's going to unlock the capacity.
Right.
I think the delays in it being deployed commercially are mostly because we're trying to do that in parallel to a massive capacity on fixed bottom, which is easier. So companies are concentrating much more on the easier bit, but also because there are certain challenges with floating. You cannot just have a wind turbine that has been designed to go on a pile that is fixed, assume that you're going to put it on a floating
Yeah.
substructure
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's
it's
right.
going to operate the same.
It's a
It's a
completely
much
separate
more
thing, isn't it? Yeah.
systems approach. And until the companies realize that and bring them into their design methodologies, is when we have things like failures very early on. If you look at some of the early floating wind demos, they've all had some sort of a glitch or a failure, major or minor, when they were deployed for 4 to 6 years. We see kincardine, we see high wind, and it's
Yeah.
because we're learning on the job. There is a piece of work that we did at the Catapult, which is also looking at the cost. If you're having, you only have floating because they are further away from shore and
Yes.
because the sea depth is too large, it will make your fixed monopile or jacket
Just too
either,
expensive, isn't it?
yeah,
Or
too
yeah.
expensive or
Yeah.
even not feasible. Um, you have to reduce the cost. They generate much more because they are larger turbines, but you also have to go through the process of shaving the cost of that development. And if you look at the cost of substructures, the cost of individual components, construction, if we can shave pounds on all of those areas, it can become quite competitive. It just takes that learning curve to go through.
If you look at where we are, you mentioned it earlier, China, number one, UK, number two. A lot of it in Scotland, but there's other places. Portugal has got a lot of wind, right? Offshore
Mhm.
wind. There's other parts of Europe that've got it, places around Africa have got it. But it seems to be very much a story of kind of Europe at present and China. Just moving ahead, looking at the wider picture rather than just the UK. Is there enough appetite for this to be a global industry as it is? Because I wouldn't say it is right now. I might be being unfair. I don't know your view, but I
Mhm.
kind of don't see it as global at present, the way that, you could say solar panels are, for example.
I think that's really insightful. So, we're working with the Department of Business and Trade. We've had a program going on for 2 years where we've deployed our experts to 14 different countries in the world. The program is called Market Access Barriers. And what we've been tasked by the UK government is to work with their local supply chains, their local ports, and their local authorities, so the equivalent to the Crown Estate, governments, and so on,
Yeah,
to help them identify what barriers are they encountering for deployment of offshore wind. And you wouldn't believe every country is completely different.
of course, of course.
Some countries it's the interaction with fisheries, some countries is lack of logistical support, some countries is policy. There's all shades of barriers. And then what do we do about them? How can we unblock those barriers? And there's a lot of appetite. Brazil, Japan, Vietnam, there's Taiwan, South
Wow.
Korea, India, lots of appetite across the globe. They're just less mature than we are
That,
in the UK.
yeah,
They're early on.
got it. Couple of things I want to talk about before we end. Um, in the you said right early on, you said this is a new industry, right? Offshore oil and gas, 60, 70, 80 years, whatever. Very good kind of idea of what they're doing. And this is a big part of where, you say you go up to Aberdeen quite a lot. It's a big thing, that transition, right? The government wants to switch it all off. They want to take those people, and you don't want to lose the jobs. You don't want to
Mhm.
lose that knowledge as well of the oceans. So on that transition point, where are we with that? Because unions say one thing, politics says nothing, something else. I don't want to get into that from your side of things, but from the kind of science and from the research point, is there enough harmony between the two industries that those people, because that's what it's about at the end of the day, people need to have jobs, they can
Absolutely.
transition into the offshore green industries.
Yes, and there are many opportunities. Skills are transferable. We have a need for that. I had an old, not old as in age, but a colleague, a previous colleague.
I'm pretty old, so I don't mind.
Yeah, we used to say, you would go anywhere in the world to any
Mm.
oil and gas rig, and you would hear a Scottish accent.
Yes, true.
So it is my mission that you go to any project in the world where there is offshore wind, and you will hear a UK accent. There will be somebody there. It is a difficult transition because culturally both sectors are different. The amounts of return on investment are very different. Oil and gas has been flush with funds,
Yeah,
and
of course. Yeah.
they've supported supply chains for many years. We're not there yet with offshore wind, but the projections of jobs required for offshore wind, to give you an understanding, right now in the UK, there's about 30,000 people working in offshore wind. We
Wow.
are
That's more than I thought,
projecting,
actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're projecting about 100,000 people by 2030 or early 2030s. Where are these people coming from?
Oil and gas. This is what we need. And if you look at what's happened, there's been so much of this kind of push to close down that there's got to be the plan for the people, hasn't there?
Absolutely. And I have people in my team in Aberdeen, particularly, whose parents are either working in oil and gas or were at some point made redundant in oil and gas, and their children are working in offshore wind.
Yeah, that's good. Initially, we were going to do this chat during International Women's Week, but it's always International Women's Week here on Future Net Zero. All joking aside, one of the other things that I've seen is more women joining these offshore wind sector compared to the amount of women that would have joined oil and gas, right? Now, again, that could be two different things. It could be that the fact that the whole sector is less kind of, dare I say, dirty, harsher. It's less like that. You're not on an oil rig for months at a time. You go and visit these things. Is there enough skills to, you talked about sort of people, older people reskilling. Is there enough to get this to be a much more kind of, balanced in terms of gender sector so that it is moving forward with equal amounts of men and women working in it?
I would hope so. And there are many jobs to be done. There are not only, the hands-on jobs that perhaps women historically have not pursued as much as their male counterparts, but talking about consenting, construction, operation, developing technology, running the assets, uh, many office jobs, many finance, legal, analysts, engineering jobs. So there's a plethora of skills that we need that are not what we would consider historically gender specific or more gender
Yeah.
biased. So we are doing a lot, and I mean not just the catapult, but the community, in having networks, doing awareness courses from
Yeah.
early on in the children's schools, all the way to mentoring women when they enter the sector, because we don't want to lose those people. I'm very proud that at the Catapult we have a magnificent EDI culture, and I always say, and we always remind people, it's not just about gender, it's
Yeah.
also about background, ethnicity, sexual preference, your marital status or not. We need diverse teams. They become richer teams, and they provide richer outcomes if we have variety of thought.
What's your hope? Let's go forward to 2050. Okay. Our great net zero target. I don't think we're going to reach that, my personal view. But anyway, we'll be along the road. We're looking at kind of, the next 20 odd years. If you see what the projections and what governments want, that it becomes as big as oil and gas became in the 70s and 80s. but also you need to look at the newer things, right? Because people didn't really care that much about drilling and seas and, whales and mammals. You've got to do this kind of responsibly. So if you look at where things are now, do you believe that we will have a very big, whether it's big in terms of size or big in terms of its kind of presence, in terms of giving us power, an offshore wind sector, offshore, not just wind, offshore renewable energy sector by 2050?
I'm certain we will. Certainly on the offshore wind side of things, projections are anywhere between 75 to 125 gigawatts of deployed capacity. And again, we're part of a system. I know I represent offshore renewables. We can't deliver that without a base of nuclear, hydropower,
Of course.
There's solar. It has to be at systems level. I do believe there is a massive place for offshore wind globally, not just in the UK. And you say my vision, what I would like is, 2050 is probably around the time I retire. And what I would like is for my children not to have this issue and this challenge, is so that we've come up to a standard where these are everyday deployed activities. It's still a vibrant sector, but there's no question about whether it fits into the overall system of things. It's just a thing we do because we know it's best for the planet.
Good point to end on. Well, look, let's hope it's true for your kids, my kids, that they work, in a greener world. Thank you, Christina. I know you're a very busy person, so thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks to you.
No, my pleasure, my pleasure. And if anyone wants to check it out, what's the website for ORE?
It's www.orecatapult.org.uk.
So if you're a small company, it doesn't matter what size you are. If you're looking at something in that, there's a lot of advice there and lots of ways of getting involved, correct?
Correct.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thanks, ladies and gents, for listening. My thanks to Sohi for the production this week. Catch you next week on the Net Hero podcast.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from FutureNetZero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. FutureNetZero.com. Better business, better planet.